will be starting in just 1 minute.
Autonomous aerial vehicles.
This is
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll just be starting in 1 minute. Okay, well, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for Savannah Jewish Family Service Food for Thought program. Please note, if you have any questions during the program, please write them in the chat. We'll have Q&As at the end. I'm honored to call upon Tom Glazer to introduce our speaker for today, John Medved.
Thank you, Sunny, and hello, everybody. It's good to be in Savannah today. Israel is very much on all of our minds, I know, and while our speaker certainly is conversant on what's happening on the political scene and with the strife that we're all so concerned about, he is really, in my mind, the foremost intellect and observer and participant in what I call Israel's technology economic miracle. I had the pleasure of working with John Medved in my capacity as president of the American Israel Chamber of Commerce for many, many years. He was one of my key go-to guys in Israel whenever I brought delegations from the Southeast states to Israel. John Medved was always one of our stops. He would assemble portfolio companies to meet with. He would speak to our leaders. I had him speak as my guest in Atlanta several times, and he came through for me every time. He is an amazing person. His background is in the technology industry. He made Aliyah when he was a fairly young man. He'll tell you a little bit about that, I'm sure. He has been involved in running technology startups in the startup nation. When I first got to know John, he was the founder and general partner of Israel Seed Partners in Jerusalem, which invested in some really fantastic companies that had outstanding exits. Later, he became CEO and was co-founder of a tech company called Vringo. And then most recently, I think, John, you'll have to correct me, was it starting in about 2013?
That's correct.
John really came up with a new paradigm for investing in Israel called OurCrowd. He's going to tell you about it. It, I believe, is the most profoundly effective investment strategy that allows non-millionaires and billionaires to invest in Israeli startup companies under the umbrella of a great crowdfunding resource. And John is the brilliant mind behind it and the dynamic leader. I'm proud to call him my friend. He's a great Israeli. He's a great patriot. And we're lucky to have him speaking to us today. My friend, John Medved.
Thank you, Tom. It's very kind. And I'm glad to be meeting all of you for the first time in Savannah. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. You guys should all know, I'm sure you probably do, that the work that Tom Glazer did in building the Southeast Israel American Chamber of Commerce was unique, because everybody always kept on asking me, why are so many Israeli companies going to the Southeast? What's with Georgia? You know, they knew that there was some kind of an active Jewish community, but it's not New York, it's not Silicon Valley, And yet there were dozens and dozens of these companies, who would set up shop, who would do strategic deals with Coca-Cola and with UPS and you name it. And people were surprised. Israelis didn't get it. And they kept on saying, okay, you come from America, you understand what's going on there. What the heck is this all about? And I said, well, there's actually two words, and this is all you have to know: Tom Glazer. Okay, and really, when history is written properly, Tom will have a chapter there about how do you properly really build strong economic ties. And the nation of Israel and the Jewish people owe you a debt, Tom, for everything that you've done in your distinguished career. And in that,
Thank you, John. Nice.
So it's tough talking to a group today. I'm usually the bearer of good news. That's my job. In the Jewish world, we're always essentially, I don't know how many of you speak some Yiddish, schwer zu sein Yid. It's tough to be a Jew. Okay, it's the way that the sort of the Jewish world works. We get people scared. We worry about threats, anti-Semites everywhere. Okay, Israel's in danger, etc. I'm usually the guy who is the antidote to that. I tell the story about how great Israel is. Okay, I like to tell it about its cultural stuff, but my job is economics. I'm an investor. I invest in Israel. Right now, I run this thing called OurCrowd, which is the most active venture investor in Israel. We've got about $1.8 billion in funding commitments. We've invested in 260 companies. We're doing great. The country is really doing well in the tech side, and I'm going to give you some of that good news in a few minutes. But it's not appropriate to start today just with the good news, because there's a lot of bad news out there right now. And Israel is again at war. You can call it what you want. It's Operation Guardian of the Walls, as I think its official name now. In Hebrew, it's Mivtza Shomer HaChomot. Okay. But there have been 500 missiles shot at Israel over the last 3 days. Can you imagine what would happen if there were 500 missiles shot at Washington or New York, how America would react to whoever shot those missiles? But it's not just the missiles that are falling and hurting people, most of them being, thank God, shot out of the sky by the miraculous product of Israeli technology called the Iron Dome, which is managing to pick off about 90%, which is a good number, except that means that 50 missiles have got through and they're landing and they're hurting people and killing people, unfortunately. But the scarier part of what's going on now is that Hamas has managed to stir up the Arab residents of Israel. We're not talking the West Bank or Gaza. We're talking about Arabs who are living in Israel proper, in what are called mixed cities like Lod near the airport, or Akko, Acre up in the north, or Haifa, and in other cities within Israel where there are riots going on every day, and Jews are being lynched. And I'm using the word lynched advisedly to a group of people who are Southerners, because you guys know what lynch is about, unfortunately. But people are being dragged from their cars and beaten to death. Now, it's mostly Arabs doing it to Jews, but now Jews are getting into the act as well and doing it back to Arabs. And it's extraordinarily dangerous, very dangerous, and very scary situation that's going on now. The government has called up 10 battalions of Border Patrol to go and provide reinforcements to the Israeli police, who are struggling to handle the number of areas of concern in the country, from the Negev, where the Bedouin are literally throwing rocks at people as they drive by Beersheba, to Arad, where they knock down lighting on and blocked the road to Arad, to every town in the country really is now experiencing some kind of horrible, almost anarchy. And as an Israeli, we'd never seen this before. And the government is trying to get a handle on it, but we'll see tonight. It usually peaks up at night, and the scenes that are coming out of some of these things are just horrific and very scary indeed. Now, the other thing which is scary about this is the way that people are covering it and looking at it abroad. This one, we did not start, okay? We never start them, frankly, okay? Sometimes in 1967, we stopped them from annihilating us. Yeah, we started that one, okay? Because they were threatening to throw us into the sea and finish the job that Hitler tried to do. But this one was basically Israel trying to maintain order in Jerusalem, where there were, would you believe, 100,000 people praying on the Temple Mount. First of all, Israel allowing people to pray on the Temple Mount, and then deciding to put together wheelbarrows full of rocks and riot. And so the police put down the riot. Can you imagine a riot with 100,000 people and not one died? But this is now being used as a pretext by Hamas to start the firing of the missiles, and which is now leading to the chaos which is breaking out between Arabs and Jews, and basically a pogrom, which is going on in Israel, where basically, to my horror, Jews are being killed in cold blood, okay? And it's just scary. And somehow, if I read correctly through the lines of how the American media, whether it's TV or papers or whatnot, or the internet is covering it, is guess what? Israel's at fault. Israel did it. Israel started it. We stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque. There were 4 people who were in a case for 10 years in the Supreme Court, okay, about giving Jews back their apartments in Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem. Really? This is what it's all about? And the answer is, in my opinion, this was a very, very smart move on the part of our enemies, because Hamas is an enemy. We can have no equivocation here. Hamas wants to destroy the state of Israel. They are an enemy. They are not a partner. They are not someone we should talk to. We can only fight with them. But these guys basically, I think, saw that there was reconciliation going on between Israel and the Arab countries, and that actually, for the first time in history, it looked like there was going to be a government set up in Israel with active support of an Arab parliamentary party, which was going to really issue in a new age of Arab-Israel Jewish cooperation. And that would be poison for Hamas. So that's the moment they strike, and they had this thing planned out, and it's so far they are leading. Even though Israel is, our boys and girls in the army are doing a great job, I think on a strategic level, we're behind in this one. And the support we get from the Jewish world, from you in Savannah and from Jews all over the world, and it's support in multiple ways. It's political support, it's financial support, but it's moral support, it's public opinion support. This is incredibly important. This war that we're in now is not going to end tomorrow. It's unfortunately going to be with us for a while. And I hate to be a bearer of, I don't know what you guys are reading or seeing, but the situation here ain't good. Really is not good at the moment. So I'm speaking to you as a father of 2 active reservists. They just called up 9,000 reservists today. There's talk about a ground incursion. It's a tough time. But now we're going to make a fast shift, okay, over to my topic. And we'll spend some time talking about it, and I'll let you guys ask questions about whatever you'd like. But today I had to lead a company-wide meeting for my OurCrowd people. And we employ 215 people. I started this in 2013. We're an Israeli startup serving other Israeli startups. And, the majority of our people live in Israel. Of the 215, about 150 work in Israel. But that means we have 65 employees around the world, in the US mainly, but some in Canada and some in Hong Kong and some in Singapore. They're everywhere. And I had to explain to them what's going on. Okay. And I told them a little story, which I'm going to start off with, which affected me a lot and I think is appropriate to start tonight's discussion. Back when I started OurCrowd, which today is at $1.8 million, that's $1,800 million. It's a lot of money we've raised for Israel in pretty much 8 years. I was desperately looking for my first investor, and it was 2012. We opened up the shop in 2013. And I had some visitors who were coming from the States who were looking at making $1 million investment. And I was excited because this $1 million was really critical to the success of my business. And they came, and literally during their visit to Israel, whereas I was showing them companies that we were going to invest in together with them, all of a sudden the Operation Tzuk, we call it in English, which I guess it was, what's Suketan in English again? Do you remember, Sonny? Or somebody else? Anyway, it was the 2012 Gaza affair, opened up, and they started firing missiles. And they were spending their time in Jerusalem, and we were planning a trip to Tel Aviv. And so they weren't particularly concerned because it was just missiles going into Sderot, those poor guys, always catching it. And we went to Tel Aviv this day, and they said, is there anything we got to worry about? Are they going to fire on Tel Aviv? And I said, nah, they can't get to Tel Aviv. The missiles don't reach. Don't worry about it. Turns out the day before this day, the Israeli army had installed Iron Dome in Tel Aviv just in case. And we had a great day seeing companies. And about 7 p.m., as soon as we were done, we get in my car to drive them back to Jerusalem where they were staying. And as we start to drive through the streets of Tel Aviv, my windows are down. It was a nice day. And we hear a siren going off. And I say, what? A siren? Holy smokes, we got to get off the road. So I pull over to the side, and it's on one of those little on-ramps, which is just filthy, right? There's trash, and it's not a particularly clean thing. These investors are wearing Armani and Zegna suits. And I tell them, guys, out of the car now, face down in the dirt. And they look at me like I'm a nutcase, like I'm going to go mess up I said, face down in the dirt. This is a siren. There are missiles coming at us now. Get down. And as soon as I said that, they've hit the ground, put their hands behind their heads, and literally 5 seconds later, a huge boom went off. And it turns out that this was the first missile ever fired at Tel Aviv, and it was taken out by the Iron Dome. And they started to get up because they figured it was over. I said, sit down there. We're supposed to wait here for 5 minutes until making sure no missile fragments are still coming. And when they got up afterwards, they were shaken. And I was depressed because I had invested a lot of time with these investors. And I figured that this investment is not going to happen, right? People who've just experienced being in a missile attack aren't really going to write a check, are they? And so we drive back to Jerusalem. It's sort of tense in the car. Finally, at the end of the ride, they say, look, we want to see you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. I said, yeah, I figure. And we'll talk about this investment. I said, okay, great. We'll see you at 8. So 8 o'clock, I show up at their hotel. We're getting breakfast, and we finally sit down, and they say, okay, we got to talk to you about that investment. I said, yep. They said, well, we're going to change it. And I said, yep, I knew it was going to get canceled. They said, we're not investing $1 million. I said, yep. He said, we're going to invest $2 million. I said, what? He said, well, we're going to do 2 million for two reasons. One, the companies you showed us were amazing companies, and we think that they deserve the $2 million of funding. But number two, if these sons of bees from Gaza think that they're going to scare New York investors away by a stupid missile, they got another thing coming. They're dealing with New Yorkers. And they doubled down, and that's the true story of how I got my first $2 million commitment for OurCrowd. And the rest is sort of history. So let's talk a little bit about the Israeli economy. I'm going to share some slides with you now. So Israel today is recognized around the world as the startup nation, as a miracle in technology and economics. Back in the old days, when I first met Tom Glazer, I had to dig up this data from the Israeli embassy or from some kind of Jewish organization. But now the World Economic Forum does it for me. The World Economic Forum are the guys who put on that Davos show in Switzerland, where the world's billionaires and corporate titans come together. And they're the ones who say that Israel is number one, whether it's in growth of innovative companies or R&D, number two, venture capital availability after the US, number one in disruptive ideas. It's quite remarkable. But if you look at it from a dollars and cents standpoint, you see this unbelievable story. That over that last decade, you can see where we were in 2012. We were about $1.5 billion invested in Israeli startups for the whole year. Today, OurCrowd has more than that by itself. It was 1.5 billion. Look at what we did last year. Last year, that number went up over $10 billion. But if you look at what happened in the first quarter of this year, it's over 5 billion. We're headed for a $20 billion year, God willing, okay, for Israeli technology. What does that mean? Well, let's look at it in the context of US military aid or charity. The US puts in about 3.8 billion a year of very necessary military aid to build things like Iron Dome, which are keeping us safe. And the US gets all that money, by the way, is spent in the US, or much of it is. But in addition to that, the other big sources of money going into Israel are charity. A lot of charity goes, and very necessary charity, to the universities, the Hebrew University, the Technion, Tel Aviv, your favorite university, you name it. They go to hospitals, Hadassah, Sheba, Shaarei Tzedek. They go to yeshivas. They go to the JNF. They go to the Joint. They go everywhere. The total amount of that charity is about $3 billion annually. So you got 3.7 from the US government and 3 billion from mostly the Jews of the world. That's about 6.7 billion. What I'm telling you is that the money invested in Israeli startups this year is going to be 20 billion, or essentially 3 times all the charity and government stuff put together. Now, the question here is, if that's such an important part of Israel's economy, which it is, then why don't we talk about it more in our Jewish communities, in our organizations? We really should. And we have to figure out how people get involved with this. The first quarter was amazing. Now, in the tech business, there's a concept known as a unicorn. Don't know if you guys, know what that is. A unicorn, I think it was chosen because it was to define essentially a private technology company that hadn't yet listed on a stock exchange that was already worth $1 billion. And they were rare because in the old days, when companies got to be worth $1 billion, they went public. Not anymore. Today, there are over 600 of these unicorns worldwide, 600 companies worldwide that are not yet public that are worth $1 billion plus. Guess what? 63 of them are Israeli. 10% of the world's total is Israeli. Now you might say, hey, that's sort of normal, right? Israel's, well, Israel's what percentage of the world's population? 1/10 of 1%. So we've got 100 times our rate of unicorns. That's because we're Israel and because we're the Jewish nation. Now, in America, the two coasts are fighting it out for who can get these unicorns. California now has 22 of them. New York City has 21, and they're dueling them because all these Israeli companies come to America, create US jobs, work with American companies. And at the heart of this ecosystem in Israel are the thousands of entrepreneurs, the IDF, which is the Israel Defense Forces, their tech units, venture capital funds, and multinationals like Intel, who are busy buying these startup companies and doing R&D. Intel, by the way, in its 30 some years of working in Israel, maybe actually 35 now, they've invested $50 billion in Israel in total, 50. Intel is so committed to Israel, there are almost 15,000 employees. And in my opinion, they should change their logo to say Israel inside, okay? Because it's just that important for Intel. Israel also did very well with Corona, all things considered. We had 3 rounds of it, but we really led the world in terms of vaccination. This is a slide from less than a month ago showing how, Israel really vaccinated much quicker. It's that top line you see. And that's caused our economy to come fully back, and everything's open now. There's virtually no COVID in the country. There are a bunch of ties that are growing stronger. Europe is investing a lot more in Israel. Japan represents about 11%. China is down because of the tension between the US and Israel has to choose sides. And believe me, we'll choose the US, okay, if we have to. And now we have a bunch of new friends, okay, in the Gulf because of the normalization as a result of the Abraham Accords. And that's quite remarkable. And we believe that this is going to open up a lot of money coming into the venture capital and the startups. And we're very excited and active ourselves in this whole process. Now, finally, Israeli companies are now moving into what we call B2C, which is business to consumer, not just the business to business attitude. And Israel's very, very strong in semiconductors, where there's a lot of fighting going on between the US and China, and in general, companies trying to get into the semiconductor business. So just a couple words about OurCrowd. And by the way, I will send you an email after this event with my address so that if you want to be in touch with us, you can find out. These are our numbers. Again, I said $1.8 billion raised. We've invested now in 260 companies. And by the end of this month, we'll have 100,000 members, 100,000 people who are investors, who are accredited investors who've registered for OurCrowd. What I want to do is I'm going to stop sharing this slide. I'll come back to it in a second, but I'm going to show you another slide, which is a live view of our website, of what we actually do at OurCrowd, and I'll take you on a little tour. So at any given time, we give individual investors, family offices, or even corporations, the ability to choose a startup, meaning a private company, like they would buy a stock. Right? Today, if any of you want to buy Apple or Google or Facebook, you pick up the phone, you call your broker, or you go online, to Schwab or to Robinhood, and you buy a stock. But if you want to get involved in a startup, how do you do it? Well, today, that's what you do at OurCrowd. That's what our 100,000 people look at. And they say, okay, what I want to understand about this company, Consumer Physics, which happens to be an ag tech company. You guys do a lot of agriculture down in Georgia. These guys basically are used to measure moisture, sweetness, protein in every kind of a crop. They're run by a brilliant guy who, Asaf Karmi, who He's got his PhD in physics, but he also happens to be a divisional commander of the Israeli Tank Corps. So he's a warrior geek, if you will. And then you get to see here, their whole information about the company, what it does. Okay, these are guys who are, their business is growing very, very rapidly. And you get to see their products. They're selling, by the way, to all the giants like Corteva and Syngenta and Bayer. These guys are all customers already of this Israeli company and using it very happily. You get a bunch of information about the company beyond that. And then you want to invest, you basically go here, you click. Hopefully you want to put in 200,000. You can put in as little as actually 10, and then you're done. So that's the way that it works in general. And there are just so many interesting companies with interesting opportunities that you can look at. So for example, this company next to 3D is a 3D printing company. There are funds. Okay, this one, oh, I love this company, Bionic Hive. I got to show you their video. This was a video which was actually tweeted by Elon Musk from Tesla. He put this on his Twitter feed, and you'll see why in a second. Just watch this. Oh no, this is too much. I thought he was going to show the short. This is not the one that Elon Musk tweeted. I am sorry. False advertising. I've got to see if we have it down below on the site. It's a really great video. If they don't have that up there, I'm going to be upset. No way. Okay, well, you help me because I'm going back to my people. There's a video out there, which maybe I'll send you a link when I send you the email. Thank you. But this is a company using a robot for warehouses, which is really, really cool. Lovely, interesting company, which you'll see when I send you the link. But you go back to these companies, and there's Honeybook, which if you had a kid who's running a single operator, a wedding photographer, or a massage therapist, he runs his business on Honeybook. They just became a unicorn, by the way. Tomorrow Robotics is brain surgery by robot, taking care of glioblastomas with a robot. Launchpad is small-scale manufacturing with robots. Insect is growing fly larvae for fish food, okay, for big, healthy salmon that taste good. Cordio Medical is discovering cardiac heart failure or chronic heart failure, CHF, by listening to you talking to a cell phone. You basically download the app, you talk to your phone, and it will tell you if you've got CHF. Big, big breakthrough. And then there's a whole bunch of other really cool companies. Again, this company, Polaris Quantum Biotech, a couple of Israelis down over in Chapel Hill who are using for the first time the new quantum computing to do drug discovery. And onward and onward. This is another drug discovery company. This is a company inventing new kinds of materials. You get all this great stuff. And we turned out, I'm going to stop the share now and go back to finish the slides, and I'll take your questions. Let me go back and share this other screen. So it turns out that what each of these deals are deals that we invest in our own capital, and then we invite you to join us. And we essentially take you together with all of our members from around the world and write a single check to these companies. We have to help them. We have to sit on their boards of directors. We have to make introductions for them, et cetera. That's pretty much what we do. So I'm going to stop the presentation at this point. I think that we've had enough of frontal talking, Tom, and if we can, turn this more into a dialogue. It's a small enough group. I would love to hear questions from your folks.
I actually have a question, if you don't mind me starting this off.
I do not mind, Sunny. You've been very kind. Thank you.
I am wondering if you're thinking of having an app on your phone, or if you have one already.
We do. And it's the OurCrowd mobile app. You can get it on your phone. Good question. It's being improved constantly. There's a lot of information to get in a very small screen on the phone. And therefore, many of our people, especially people who are more or less the demographic of this group, usually prefer to look at the larger screens, to get the information. But we do have a mobile app, and it's getting better all the time. Question.
I have a question. I'm Carol. Hi. Sorry you
Hi,
can't
Carol.
see me today. But finances are not my best thing. So basically, you are looking for investment like angel partners for the various companies that you represent and support. But do you also, I would assume that the bulk of your investment partners are corporate as opposed to individual. What percentage is what? And as a local Jewish community, we often, it's not the big dollars that you're talking about, but we often support various charitable giving in Israel, for example. Is there a way that you look towards federations and other Jewish charities to help you in working with these companies?
Brilliant questions, Carol. Thank you. Two parts. Let's start with the first one. The majority of our investors, those 100,000 investors, those are individuals. Now, in order to be a member of OurCrowd, you have to be what's called an accredited investor, which is a US SEC definition, which says you have to have either an annual income of $200,000 or you have to have $1 million of assets outside of your house. There are about 10% of American families, believe it or not, that meet that asset test. Those are the people who we can have. At the moment, of our 100,000 people, about 57% are from the US and Canada, but the rest are from around the world. We have a good group from Israel, but maybe about 5%, 5,000 people on Israel, whereas we have over 50,000, from the US. We do have about 1,000 corporations and family offices, which is a lot, and they put in very large money, but we also have a lot of billionaire family offices who put large money in. And the whole idea behind OurCrowd is to be democratic so that the relatively small guy, I mean, I guess you have to have $1 million, so that means you're not so small, but the person who's putting in $10,000 is getting the same treatment and the same deal as the person who's putting in 10 million. And we have families who can put a $10 million check in, and we have families who put the 10,000, and they're all part of the same community. Now, the role for the charity organization is a little different because we're not a charity. We're making money. This year we're going to be quite profitable, and we make money from two methods. One is that we charge you a management fee to be investing in our deals, and that's 2% per deal per year for a maximum of 4 years. So if you invest $10,000 in a company, we take $200 as a management fee for a year for 4 years. And then if that $10,000 grows to be worth 110, and you might think, hey, this guy's crazy. No one knows how to do that, but it does happen, believe me. Not often as I'd like, but it happens. And that's why you got to have a portfolio. We take 20% of that upside. So if you actually did turn your 10,000 into 110, and we made a profit of 100,000, we'll take 20,000 of that. And it turns out that this year, we're going to have many, many tens of millions of dollars. We're getting close to $100 million of revenue ourselves this year as we grow the platform and we have more and more success. But our interests are aligned with our investors. But the thing which I wanted to talk to you about, Carol, and the rest of the audience, is the fact that today there's about $100 billion in Jewish charities and endowments around the country, right? Every big federation has their endowment fund. Some of them are big, worth billions of dollars. Almost none of it is invested in Israel. And that, my old Bubba would have said, is a shanda. Okay, of the $100 billion in Jewish charities, less than 1% is invested in Israeli investments. And that should change. And so to that extent, we would like to talk to federation endowments around the country about how they can make investments which will pay off for their investors and also be aligned with the mission. Other questions? Carol coming up with a follow-up?
Well, yeah, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
Hey,
I
no,
thought
no one else jumped in. You waited politely.
Go on, Aaron. It's your turn. It's your turn. No, I am. I'm really fascinated by this because I actually, so I have a very small nonprofit, and in trying to learn about business, I took a lot of courses in angel partnerships and investment. And we always look to Israel and Israeli ingenuity for cutting edge programs and products that we're all very proud of. But it does seem to be an anomaly that we have not used our funds in order to invest in a different way. But I would assume that, and Adam Solander can speak to this, it's because when people invest in our funds, our endowment funds, they're not looking for anything that's going to be risky. So
Yeah,
what
but you
type
see,
of risk does somebody take on if a federation were to advance the cause of investment in Israel? Because I think it's a very good question as to why we don't do it more.
yeah, I'll tell you, the investment in general is a risky business. You think that if you invest in the stock market, trust me, it goes up, and it's been doing great over the last decade plus. It also goes down. There's always risk, but that's why I imagine Adam's probably a financial advisor. I'm getting that vibe from him, or at least someone who's financially savvy. And that's why you have advisors. You have people who understand risk and understand different asset classes. And it turns out that venture capital has been the most esoteric, is considered, by the way, the most risky asset class in the world, but also the most lucrative. In Hebrew, by the way, venture capital, which sounds in English like a trip to Disneyland, it's an adventure. In Hebrew, we call it hon sikun, which means danger capital. It's totally about risk. But if you find the right practitioners, you can actually mitigate that risk. And the way you do it is you invest in a portfolio, because you're doing startups and these things die. I mean, the problem you have in venture capital is you put, $100,000 in what seems like a great idea, and the guy or the gal screw it up. They fight with their partner. They fight with their investor. They get tired. God, I believe me, I've seen it all. I've made about 500 of these kinds of investments. I can name you a litany. It's like that old song that, how many ways to leave your lover? How many ways to screw up a startup? There's a lot of them. Okay. And the bottom line is that there are ways to do this right. And the biggest nonprofit and endowments in the world do venture capital a lot. So I don't know if any of you heard a guy named David Swensen. He was the legendary manager of the Yale University Endowment. He just died last week. Too young. He was a brilliant guy, had cancer. But Swensen is the most admired asset manager for an endowment anywhere. He grew the Yale Endowment from $1 billion to $30 billion. This year, Yale will put 23% of their endowment into venture capital. And they're the best performing endowment in the world. So venture capital, while it is indeed danger capital, is also very, very lucrative when well. And that's the whole reason for OurCrowd's existence, is that for you by yourself to try to figure out which Israeli startup you should invest in, or to try to go find one and to try to talk your way in, forget about it, as they say in Queens. It's not going to happen, okay? But we try to do this for you. We invest our own capital, so we are at risk just with you. And basically, we make money as you make money. If you don't get profit, we don't, the management fee barely keeps us going, okay? I have 215 people, as I told you before. The real money we make is our 20% of the ups, when people make money on our investments. Next
John,
question. Yes.
John, have you ever done a a bundle of companies, pseudo mutual fund scenario?
Great question, Adam. The answer is yes. And if I can share my screen, I'll show you the best one of those. Look, we have 27 different funds that are 27 different bundles, and you can go to our website and you can look at them. But this is the one that I recommend is the best introduction to what we're doing. It's called OC50. Now, the minimums for our funds are $50,000. And this one takes your $50,000 investment and splits it into 50 $1,000 pieces and deploys it into 50 different companies. So you're getting massive diversification, which reduces the risk. And right now, if you look at the performance of this, it's generating a gross IRR, an internal rate of return, about 19%. We're up 50%. And this is, by the way, a fund that was closed in 2018. So by the end of and this is data at the fourth quarter of last year. So, it's a very, very, you look at the companies, of the 50 companies, 6 of them have already exited, have been either bought or gone public, and they returned 2.5 times the capital that we invested there. 30 of them have been written up and 7 have been marked down. And that's the way this fund is doing. So again, I would urge you to go, excuse me, please, I can't talk. I'm sorry, I'm just being in my home office without a secretary, and I forgot to pull out my cord. So now I'm quiet. I would urge you to go and to look at this data, on our website and study it. And then if you have any questions, send me an email and we'll have one of our people talk to you.
John, can you give examples of 1 or 2 what you consider to be OurCrowd's biggest hits so far?
Okay, I'll share some screens. Make it easier for me.
All right.
Hold on. Okay, so the most interesting companies we've had in terms of success have been a company, by the way, I'm not showing a slide of it, called Lemonade, which was the best performing IPO in the US last year, an insurtech company that we invested in privately. Symbol, by the way, publicly is LMND. And then we had a great success with Beyond Meat, which, by the way, is not an Israeli company. It is an American company, which we invested in. And we invest both in American and Israeli companies, but the majority of our investments are in Israel. This is one I love much, Tom. This company called Locust View. You know that the Biden administration is planning trillions of dollars for infrastructure. And what these guys do is they build utility infrastructure for gas, for electric, for cable or telco, and they help these either telcos or utilities make their infrastructure smart. They put a bunch of sensors in and planning. Companies on fire. It just raised actually a $50 million round. We're doing really well with this one. You'll hear about this company a lot. This company, Medved, is a company that cleans the air in your indoor environment. We're all breathing bad air. We know that because of COVID to a certain degree. These guys have the best air cleaning process, which, by the way, works in huge buildings like at Harvard University, or others, and it actually saves energy while it cleans the air. CropX is an ag tech company that we use to put sensors in the ground. I think, Tom, you know this company. And they are doing great. They're growing, and the revenue is really, getting good. Taranis is another ag tech company which goes over satellite data to give you data intelligence for farming. Ripple's another American company. Phantom Auto is cool. These are guys who give you remote control of these delivery bots so that, you know, if they get in trouble, they'll essentially, a guy like on a video game will drive the bot, you know, and take over. It's doing really good. Nexa 3D is a 3D printing company, about 20 times faster than the other guys. Juganu is a smart lighting company for smart cities. Taval is an American company in the food area. Diagnostic Robotics is Israeli, doing triage for medical cases in hospitals. Alpha Tau is shooting radioactive darts to kill cancer. TytoCare you use to do telemedicine. And Tom, I can go on and on, as you can imagine, but that gives you a little taste of some of them.
Yeah.
I think we'll take one more question and then we'll wrap it so that they'll stop, you know, bothering me on the phone. Somebody's trying to get to me.
I believe, Richard, I see that you had a question.
Well, it's pretty much answered. I want to get an email from you and we'll start a conversation.
I look forward to it, Richard. Thank you very much. I want to thank you.
I loved your book.
Thank you. Okay. It's great meeting everybody, and I hope that everybody's healthy and well and stays virus-free and fully vaccinated. And we'll look forward to someday visiting you. I've heard that Savannah is beautiful, and look forward to seeing you in beautiful Savannah or here in Israel. Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, John. Thanks for
Thanks,
being
Jen.
here. Tom,
Great
I know you wanted to share something as well.
Just my my sincere gratitude to John for doing this, but for many other things that he's done for me over the years. You're my hero, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, and thanks, Tom, for your support. Before we go today, I would like to invite all of you here today to join us for our future Food for Thought programs that are every Thursday at 1 p.m. with a wide variety of interesting speakers every week. For more information and details, please visit our website, and I just sent it in the chat, but the website is sevj.org. Hopefully see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.